We're Sainties.
St. Elizabeth University.
St. Elizabeth is the best kept secret in New Jersey. Here, turn your passion into your profession. St. E's has one goal: to support intelligent, determined young women and men, becoming the best people they are destined to be.
The power to learn.
The power to grow.
The power to succeed.
We're St. E's.
St. Elizabeth University. The power to soar.
Good morning. My name is Bill Chavella. I currently serve as the director of the Police Studies Institute at St. Elizabeth University. Welcome to a very important and timely discussion this morning about unmanned aerial vehicles, known as drones, and public safety in New Jersey. All of us in the area of New York and New Jersey know that over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of media discussion and scrutiny about issues about drones. Today, what we're going to do is bring together a group of experts in the fields of law enforcement, aviation, and higher ed to have a discussion, to get some of the myths out of what we know, and to talk about where we stand in New Jersey from a safety aspect and from a scientific aspect in terms of drones. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce this very distinguished panelist that we have this morning and ask them to give you a little bit about their background and tell them about what we can expect to hear today. First, I'd like to introduce retired from the United States Air Force Major General James Post.
Yeah, hey, good morning, and thanks for the invite for this. I know you guys in New Jersey have been going through quite a bit of turmoil with all these drones that have been appearing over our most densely populated state. So I'm Jim Post, retired from the Air Force way back in 2013. I used to be the Deputy Chief of Intelligence for the Air Force. I'm a career intelligence officer. My claim to fame with drones was my team were the first airmen to learn how to target armed drones way back when we first went into Afghanistan to take revenge for 9/11. After that, I was an intel guy, and the Air Force is run by pilots, and pilots back then didn't like drones, so it was kind of up to us intel guys to support them in the Air Force. When I got out of the Air Force, I was hired by Mississippi State University to win them the FAA's Drone Research Center of Excellence, which we did. It's called ASSURE, the Alliance for System Safety of UAS through Research Excellence. And I ran that for about a year. And ever since then, I've been consulting largely in the drone world. So thanks for the invite today.
Thank you for being here, General. I'd like to now introduce the Sheriff of Somerset County, New Jersey, which is an area that's seen quite a bit of activity and reports of drones. Sheriff Darren J. Russo.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, St. Elizabeth. Everybody that's on, I appreciate everybody coming out and helping out the community, especially, like you said, in Somerset County, we've been kind of the forefront, at least the beginning of what's been going on with the drones. A little bit about myself. I was a lieutenant in Franklin Township, Somerset Police Department for 31 years. I retired there, had about a year or two, three off, but then I came in and ran for sheriff in Somerset County. So I've been the county sheriff for 5 years, a little over 5 years. During my time in Franklin Township, I was actually running all the plainclothes units, specialized units, narcotics units, robberies, things of that nature. So a lot of surveillances, a lot of late nights, a lot of walking through the woods, trying to find people, trying to watch for people, catch people. So I bring that to the table of where I'd like to see drones, what they're becoming. I like to see, like, what they end up in the community and how they can help. I know a lot of people are I'll say panicked or cautious right now about them and what's been going on in Somerset. But I do say, and I'll probably repeat it later, is they're here. You're only going to see them more, right? They're only going to get bigger and better. And I think that for law enforcement, they can be really a real asset to what we do. So thank you again for letting me be here and speak. And I look forward to listening to everybody that's on the panel.
Sheriff, thank you. I'd like to introduce Thomas Adams, the Director of Public Safety at Drone Shield. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite. My name is Tom Adams. I am a retired FBI agent, spent 20 years in the FBI. My last 14 years in the FBI I spent as a special agent bomb technician. And then my last 3 years exactly were part of the FBI's counter drone team. We planned and conducted numerous missions at large public safety events and venues such as Super Bowl, World Series, Rose Bowls, and I also assisted in investigations of suspected drones at critical infrastructure. And since leaving the FBI, did some consulting, started a counter drone informational website called COAS Hub, and now work for Drone Shield as the Director of Public Safety. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, Tom. And finally, I'd like to introduce Richard Thompson, the owner and chief pilot of RT Drone Services. He also serves as Director of Community and Economic Development for the city of Long Branch, New Jersey. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Richard Thompson. I am currently the Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Long Branch, as well as the owner of now Jersey Shore Aerial Solutions. We're a drone company based out of Monmouth County. I have about 5 years of experience as a Part 107 pilot, 8 years as a recreational pilot, and then about 3 months as a public pilot, which is under the Certificate of Authorization. So I'm hopeful to bring municipal experience as well as commercial experience to the panel, and thank you for having me.
It's an honor to be here. And so you see from the array of individuals we have here today, it's going to be a lively discussion. Again, I serve as the Director of the Police Studies Institute. I have a 36-year background in law enforcement. I've served as the Chief of Detectives in the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, an Undersheriff in Morris County, and I currently serve for Sheriff Darren J. Russo as the head of the Community Policing and Public Affairs. I had the experience of being the law enforcement incident commander during Hurricane Sandy in Morris County. And this is pre-drones when we didn't have them. And so today we'd like to take a look from a 360 angle of the issue of drones, how they're used effectively, what to be careful of. And let's, one of the things I think we all learned over the last few weeks, regardless of the viewpoint that we have as an academic, a law enforcement person, or an aviation expert, is that we have to be cautious with the media, that we don't respond to hype. I mean, I've watched news reports, depending on, what network you watch, news reports of aliens that were landing here in Morris County and Somerset County, to military strikes being perpetuated against our nation. And we need to be cautious because many people that don't have the information, and that's why, St. Elizabeth wanted to put this together, even though it was quick. And it was something that was, relatively short, is we wanted to get out in front of some of the myths and some of the things that were happening, so people had a better understanding. As Michael Smullen, our vice president, is an amazing individual. He put this together in no time. And our president, Dr. Gary Crosby, one of the things that they task us with at St. Elizabeth is timely subjects, things that are important to people, in addition to the academic programs that we run, but things that are important to Americans and people in the area. And one thing we know in law enforcement, I'll speak, from our specific thing, is you need to be adaptable. Law enforcement issues change on a weekly basis, and you need to be adaptable. So that's what we're here to do today. So what I'd like to do is we have some questions. We thought that would be thought-provoking to bring up a discussion, and I'd like to start and invite you all on the panel to jump in and answer the questions so that we have a better understanding of what we're doing here today. The first one, obviously, when we talk about, misunderstandings and misinformation, is the methods of distinguishing aircraft and drones, known as unmanned aerial vehicles, which, by the way, is just an aside, the UAV term was something that was virtually unknown to me, that acronym, prior to about 3 weeks ago. Commonly, I would always refer to it as a drone, but now I've learned there's quite a bit more technical world than just a drone. But I'd like to throw that question out and see if anybody who would like to start with that.
Hey, I'll start out with that one. So from my perspective, I'll be honest with you, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the New Jersey drone sightings for the first couple of weeks, because I'd been through a lot of mini New Jerseys, if that's a good term to use, when I was with the FBI, and it was very common where drones were mistaken for other objects in the nighttime sky. We didn't have these issues in the daytime. It was always at night, where things like planets, low Earth orbit satellites, and objects such as that, and as well as manned aircraft, were often misidentified as drones in the airspace. The reason that happens is those types of features in the nighttime sky have a lot of similarities to drones. Plus, at night, we have terrible depth perception. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. So drones at night may appear white with a white light, or they may have white, green, and red lights, which other crewed aircraft or manned aircraft are often going to share. And then when you talk about depth perception issues, you might see a blinking light at night that looks like it's 800 meters away and hovering 200 feet above the tree line. But that may actually be a commercial aircraft that's 20 miles away flying at 30,000 feet. And during the daytime, you can tell that because you can see that tiny little aircraft and you might see the contrails behind it. But when you make it completely dark, now you don't see the tiny aircraft, you don't see the contrails behind it. All you see are the lights that are flying over you. And to many, it may look like a drone. And I'll be honest, I go outside and look at the nighttime sky all the time because that's kind of what I've been trained to do the last few years. And it is very difficult to tell the difference between a white light that's above the tree line and may look like a hovering drone, but it could be Venus or Mars or one of those other planets. Or if you see it transiting across the night sky, a white light could be the International Space Station. It could be a satellite. And then, of course, we know that manned aircraft can be misidentified for drones too. So it's important to be able to deconflict those types of things. Law enforcement has a really tough job when someone reports something that's suspicious. If you can get rid of all the things that aren't that can be misidentified as suspicious activity, it makes their job much easier.
Absolutely.
And I'll jump in here. Theoretically, telling unmanned aircraft from manned aircraft is supposed to be easy and automatic. Now it's kind of Tom went through. It's tough to visually tell a drone apart from a manned aircraft. Even in daytime. Heck, we've got drones in the Air Force and the Army that we purposely make look like manned aircraft for targeting purposes. But drones are required to carry this thing called remote ID, and they've been required to carry that for I don't know, Tom, about 9 months now. And what remote ID is it's a beacon that broadcasts at very low power, about 0.5 watts, and it broadcasts the GPS coordinates, altitude, speed, heading of the air vehicle itself, the drone, and it also broadcasts the coordinates of the remote pilot, and that's broadcast via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And when we first came up with this, allegedly law enforcement was supposed to be able to download an app from the App Store and point their phone at the drone, receive the signal, and then know everything about that drone. I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard much talk about remote ID out there. I haven't heard whether it's broadcasting or not. I was on the Remote ID Aviation Rulemaking Committee as a DHS, Department of Homeland Security representative. And there was a tremendous amount of debate about whether broadcasting at 0.5 watts on a very congested Bluetooth and Wi-Fi spectrum would work. And what I'm afraid of is we've either got a lot of, if these are in fact drones, and I don't want to, I kind of agree with Tom, they probably aren't. But if they are, they should be broadcasting this remote ID. And I'm afraid that folks like, Sheriff Russo and his crew just aren't able to hear it because it's broadcast in a very congested frequency band. Manned aircraft are supposed to carry another beacon that's called ADSB, which is a very obscure acronym. You can watch every manned aircraft flying over the United States of America on an app like FlightAware. And the reason you can do that is because they're broadcasting at up to 500 watts, and they're using what's called aviation protected spectrum, which means they have a dedicated frequency and nothing is allowed to broadcast, I think, within 4 kilohertz on there. So it's dedicated and very high power and works. Drones are not dedicated, very low power, and I'm afraid that the thing that was designed to make it very easy to identify drones just flat out isn't working. I'd be very interested in Tom and Sheriff Russo's opinion of remote ID.
Yeah, my opinion, I wasn't aware of it, which I appreciate. I'm learning here too from you guys. I appreciate that. I think that should be essential. I think that should definitely be out there for law enforcement. Now, where we're at, we have quite a few of the military right up north. We have the Trump's Golf Course right up north in Somerset County, in Morris. So, I mean, things like that for us to, even for our courthouse and some of our soft targets or something, that's a feature that I think that needs to be looked into and maybe pushed on a little bit harder to get out to law enforcement. That's what I got on that one. We definitely should be using that or have access to it.
Yeah. So go ahead. I'll go ahead and chat real quick. So I agree with General Poss. Remote ID could be a very useful tool. I do think that the ranges of some of those remote ID transmissions are very limited just because of as you mentioned, the power as well as the frequencies on which it's being broadcast on, as well as the, train interference buildings, RF interference can really impact that. So I don't know that remote ID is having quite the impact that people would like for it to have, but I think it is a great tool if we can continue to perfect it, that would not only provide information to law enforcement and public safety, but it will also enable more complex drone operations in our national airspace in the future, because drones, I might be in the counter drone side of things, but I'm also a drone advocate, and I want to see our drone industry grow because I think it's going to be a huge part of our economy for years to come. So we need to find that middle ground between safety and security.
And from a civilian standpoint, there's two things I'd like to mention. As the Major General had mentioned, Flight Radar 24 is a very popular app that you can actually look and kind of relate where in the sky certain planes are at what altitudes they're flying. So it's a great tool that civilians could use. But with the remote ID, if it's a FPV drone or something larger like that, if they don't have a remote ID signal on there, there's no way to read it if it's not on there. So that's one of the biggest issues. Is it works if people are following the law, but then law enforcement also needs the tools to be able to read the remote ID, which is a whole nother issue.
Yeah, and that's a great point. We've always got to have a plan B if plan A, the electronic beacon doesn't work, and unfortunately, plan B can be very expensive if you want an effective defense. I mean, it could range from the relatively cheap, which is radio frequency detection of the drone's data link if they use a link, to moderately expensive electro-optical or infrared cameras, to very expensive, which are these KU band radars that are very, very high frequency and about the only things that can pick up drones effectively. We're talking millions of dollars for that. So yeah, plan A, if it doesn't work, things get expensive very, very quickly.
I think Richard brings up something real quick I want to pull the thread on a little bit more, as you mentioned, compliance. I think one of the big challenges that we have right now is that as a whole, and obviously I'm not speaking about every single drone population out there, but on the whole, I don't think we have a very knowledgeable drone pilot population. We have a lot of hobbyists who don't even know that the FAA exists or might regulate drone activity. They don't know that they should be either have a trust certificate if they're a hobbyist, or a Part 107 pilot if they're commercial pilots. Don't know what a TFR is, and are the ones that are flying in some of these areas that we call them the careless and clueless. I think that's something that needs to be addressed as part of this too, is that we need to somehow find a way for us to have a more educated drone pilot population, especially with the airspace becoming more crowded. This is going to be really crucial in the future.
It brings up such an important thing, about how the evolution of this whole field, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I just want to ask a question and maybe throw a curveball in, because a very unscientific analysis of media. We're all glued to the media. My job and sheriff's job make us very media centric. I noticed that there have been discussion over the past few weeks that the drones that have that technology, that in some cases it was not broadcasting data. And, of course, that goes to, the conspiracy theorists, as whether or not they were disabled or they didn't work. And I don't know the answer to that, not being an aviation expert, but I just wonder, any thoughts from you gentlemen on the panel about that, that there has specifically been from, again, media, there have been wide media reports that data has been disabled.
I'll comment on that real quick. In fact, a friend of both General Poss and I, Don Zola, we actually wrote an article, or we wrote a paper on what is it, kind of being able to interpret remote ID information. And the thing to keep in mind, as General Poss mentioned, is that these remote ID beacons, they're being broadcast on low power over a crowded frequency band. You don't know that they may be broadcasting remote ID message elements, but you're just not receiving them due to terrain interference, buildings, RF interference, the fact that it's a low power broadcast. And so you can only say that we're not receiving remote ID message elements. You don't really know if they're broadcasting or not. So I think we have to make that distinction that we don't really know if they're broadcasting or not, which kind of goes into the thing like let's not go too far one way or another. It may not be a conspiracy. They may actually be broadcasting and it's not really an issue. We're just not receiving. We don't have enough receivers, or it's not a really significant broadcasting frequency strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but the point being, given the importance of drones now and how they're going to be even more important in the future, particularly when we start allowing drones to fly beyond visual line of sight, we got to solve this electronic beacon problem. I mean, it needs to be a big deal if someone finds a drone flying around that is not broadcasting its position. And right now, that could be because the pilot didn't know they were supposed to have remote ID. It could be that he's got an older drone that didn't have it. Only the drones that have been bought in the past 9 months or so have remote ID. And then, as Tom mentioned, because it's broadcast at very low power and a very crowded spectrum, you don't know if you have it or not. But that needs to be one of those things that, both local and federal law enforcement needs to really look at. And of course, it's expensive if they're not broadcasting in remote ID to find them. And then I assume, and I'm not sure if this is correct or not, but I'm assuming the only agency that can cite pilots for flying without remote ID is the FAA. And, they're busy and their law enforcement personnel are extremely limited. So it's something we got to solve.
Like everything else in our nation, a lot of times a crisis brings reform, and I'm quite certain that the coming weeks, the discussions will change in the tenor once we get past this and come up with it. So, gentlemen, I'd like to move to another topic of it, because we were talking about reforms. Let's talk about the current state of regulation and responsibilities where it comes to drones and unmanned aerial vehicles. Any thoughts? Who'd like to start out with that?
I can chat a little bit about that. So when it comes to the regulations side of things, something to keep in mind is we haven't had any expanded legislation related to counter UAS since 2018. That was 6 years ago. And back in 2018, DOJ and DHS received legislative relief from various provisions of federal law that allowed them to use technologies that would otherwise be illegal. They would implicate Title 18 and Title 49 type criminal statutes. And they were in specific occasions and instances, places they could use these technologies, within left and right limits and in a responsible manner. Those authorities expired in October of 2022. And the hope is that with DOJ and DHS's renewed authorities, we would also grant some additional detection type authorities to both critical infrastructure and public safety, and then also build a public safety pilot program that would start to provide mitigation or defeat capabilities and training to selected law enforcement agencies, kind of start building that bench strength, because it's not reasonable to think that the DOJ and DHS can go and protect all the events that might need protection or critical infrastructure and things like that. But that nothing has happened since those authorities have expired. There's actually been legislation on the table for the past 2.5, 3 years, so to speak, but no one's acted on it. And it's kind of funny, one of the really popular bills, Senate Bill 1631, in the middle of December got 6 new co-sponsors for some reason, even though that legislation had been sitting out there for 18 plus months. And then we just got 6 new co-sponsors that got added on. I guess maybe New Jersey had something to do with that. And people were realizing that, hey, there's a lot of things that need to change, but one of the things that needs to change is the regulations and the authorities to use this type of technology. So I think we're seeing the momentum finally shifting in the right direction, and the right people up in Congress are starting to take notice, and hopefully we'll see some action early in this next session.
Well, and let's be clear about what we can and mostly what we cannot do with the authorities that expired back in 2022, or even under the new proposed bill. State, local, tribal law enforcement can basically do nothing to mitigate drones. The mitigation authority is reserved to the feds. So the best lawyers in America are pretty sure that Sheriff Russo can surveil for drones, that he could look for that remote ID. He could probably, go out and buy a radar. Lawyers are mixed on whether he could listen for the data link, because listening for the data link is technically wiretapping, and you need a waiver for doing that. So if you take out the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of state, local, tribal law enforcement folks, you're left with the feds. And the federal rules are the DoD can engage in counter UAS operations, but in the continental U.S., they can, in the United States, they can only do that over their facilities. So, the Army in New Jersey can defend Picatinny Arsenal. The Department of Energy is allowed to defend some specified nuclear facilities, way out west. And when you get into the big authorities, it's mainly reserved for two agencies, Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice. And Department of Justice is, delegated that almost wholeheartedly to the FBI. And to be honest with you, because this is a massive unfunded mandate, I mean, the mandate is eventually going to expand to the whole country and all this critical infrastructure and all that. We're talking billions, if not trillions of dollars. Neither agency has put a lot of manpower and money into that, because it is potentially so expensive. So DHS generally just does counter U.S. operations on the border, and the Coast Guard, does their own stuff. They've got a handful of sets that they operate in conjunction with the FBI, but the vast burden of counter UAS operations has fallen on the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Back me up, Tom. Last time we talked, we had fewer than a dozen FBI agents working that, and just a handful of systems. I don't know if it's gotten any better, but it's a massive problem that the feds have taken on their own. They're not really using the hundreds of thousands of state, local, tribal law enforcement that we have, and it's just not appropriate, these present authorities, for the world that we live in.
What happens here is, who's everyone call? Everyone calls the local police, right? The sheriff, they call, and then our hands are tied. And like you just said, what are we supposed to do with it? Okay, yeah, we see them. We'll do something. Our hands are tied with that stuff. Obviously, we have the 1-800 number to call FBI to give the people that are thousands of phone calls that are coming in for this. But yeah, to learn that it has to change. I mean, we either have to be brought in and included somehow and given something to try to, like I said before, protecting our own courthouse and our own, things that we have in our towns and counties. I'm here thinking, drones are definitely the future. And, obviously what we tell people is don't panic when you see the drones. Call the FBI now is what we're trying to direct people to. But the thing, it's endless what we could use them for law enforcement. I'm sure even like the Long Branch, beach rescues, right? And things of that nature. And, I've gone back and forth with, we in Franklin, we had something set up for where technology can tell us when gunshots are on a specific corner, of a community. But then we have to respond to that. Well, what about a drone responding to it first? Seeing somebody run away, or seeing that maybe in the muzzle flash if they're early enough. Robbery. You get a robbery and a drone goes out of schools. Why not deploy them right off of the schools? We're in charge of them. We're running them through our county. But that's something that I've been looking into and working. And I know there are some towns that have really pushed it out, some cities that have really pushed out drones, and it's a great asset, and it's safety for officers, right? It's eyes on the ground. It's real life, imaging. You always look at canines, how great canines. I love canines are essential for police work. Okay, well, how about a drone to help the canine instead of, more officers out there looking for somebody that ran into the woods with a gun and, a knife. And so just to kind of get off of the subject of where you guys are at, I'm into a spot of trying to establish that, because most municipalities aren't really looking at using them to that degree, it's at that federal level, it's at that military level. So just throw it out there.
Just to touch off of the sheriff's point, I think one of the biggest things, especially speaking from a municipal standpoint, is with Long Branch, we've been working to get a drone unit set up with our police department. We have 2 thermal drones that we're working on using for search and rescue, different threats, stuff like that. And one of the biggest things is we have a lot of events that we have people flying over drones with. the only thing that we can do, because we can't read the remote ID, we can't, track it or anything like that, is we follow the drone and see where it lands. But if it's beyond visual line of sight, which if someone isn't following the laws already, they're probably not following that as well, it's almost impossible to find out where it is. Once we find the person who's launching it, we can go up to them. Hi, you're flying dangerously. If they're flying over people, there's certain FAA laws that we can basically teach them about that, but we can't enforce it. So state, municipal, county, there needs to be a willingness of those officials to learn and then be able to deploy the information that they have. But then the federal government also needs to try to improve knowledge to these different levels of government on how we can basically help our residents with this. It's a huge thing.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that struck me with the sheriff just mentioned, using technology instead of human capital when it comes to law enforcement, that's exactly what we do in the bomb squad. I know Tom is an expert in that. In NYPD, I always see in the media, they have a robot that goes out and assesses a device before you send a trained detective out there. And I think that's something to expand, in the coming times. We're getting questions in real time, so I just wanted to pivot a little bit just to bring up some issues that are coming in from listeners and the audience. When we talk about, since it's a threat, how come they have not had a complete ban on drones by the FAA until we get a better handle on it? One listener asks. Anybody want to jump into that?
From a commercial standpoint, I can tell you that drones are very necessary in day-to-day life. Whether it's municipal governments using it, companies for critical infrastructure, they're using it to inspect telephone poles, different uses like that. So I think because it's such an essential way of life for technology that we have today, I think it's something that, we can't just ban outright for a period of time.
Yeah, I'd agree too. Something I think that's important to add as part of this conversation too is really determining what is and is not a drone threat. I think a lot of people are learning for the first time over these past few weeks. Obviously, people that have been in the unmanned industry for a long time are aware of this too, but you can fly drones during the day and you can fly drones at night. There are just certain FAA rules and regulations that you have to follow at night. You have to be trained, and your aircraft has to have a flashing light that's visible for 3 statute miles at a sufficient rate to be seen, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to understand that drones can fly in the day and night, assuming they're not in regulated airspace or restricted airspace without a waiver. So we need to understand that too. And also just the fact that a drone exists in the airspace is not in and of itself a threat. Is the drone interfering with aircraft? That's a threat. Is the drone harming people? That's a threat. Is the drone harming critical infrastructure? That's a threat. If the drone's just flying over your neighborhood's not restricted airspace and it's just kind of there, okay, that's maybe something to keep an eye on, but is that worth reporting to Sheriff Russo? Maybe not, unless it's kind of doing something else. So if you can deconflict the other things that are in the airspace and really start to recalibrate what is and is not a drone threat, then it makes it easier for law enforcement to do their jobs and to focus on maybe some of the unknown things that require a little bit more investigation. I think that's important for people to understand too, is, I live in a neighborhood. I keep an eye on, just because I'm self-aware of what's going on in my neighborhood. I don't report every car that I've never seen before as a threat, but I do keep an eye. If somebody does something weird, then maybe it might elevate to a threat. So I think we kind of have to apply that same logic to the drone side of things, and we're just gonna have to get more used to these vehicles being in the airspace.
Well, and keep in mind, the FAA has banned drones from flying in very specified areas. I think you've got 40 temporary flight restrictions there in New Jersey that are up over very appropriate locations like Picatinny Arsenal, various types of critical infrastructure. So they have done it, and I do support the use of flight restrictions around critical infrastructure to do that. But it kind of boils down to the question, if we're going to ban all drones throughout the United States, explain to me why I can't have my roofing guy inspect my roof, because people may or may not have seen drones over New Jersey, because that guy, would lose, 2 or 3 inspectors a year falling off roofs that he doesn't have to do anymore because he's got drones.
Absolutely. I mean, there's from an emergency management standpoint, there's a huge use of drones. This morning, as we look at the news, we see on Route 80 in Morris County, there's a huge sinkhole. And, I know for a fact that the drones are up that are sending live footage to both the Department of Transportation, traffic, advisories. And so and I mentioned that because of its proximity to Picatinny Arsenal. That's immediately adjacent to Picatinny Arsenal. So these restrictions, have an effect on daily life. The drones have become such an important part behind the scenes of American life. And we talk about, and in the next conversation, we talk about the future regulation. I mean, companies like Amazon are going to begin to deliver packages by drone. Amazon comes to my house several times a day via truck, and I'm waiting for a drone to start to drop off my coffee beans on my front steps. And I say that in jest, but it is a big issue. And maybe we could move into, if anybody'd like to talk about the upcoming trends, where regulation and responsibilities of drones need to go in light of where we've been and where we are now.
I think definitely municipal, county, and state government need a lot more resources than we currently have. And the community needs to, I guess, learn about the current trends where drones are going. So drones are becoming a lot more affordable. You're going to be seeing a lot more in the air of people just going into retail stores, buying it, and sending it up in the air without the proper knowledge, the proper tests that they should be taking, like the trust certificate, Part 107, if they're using it for commercial. So I think knowledge base and then resources for government is kind of like where we need to start moving towards. And it'd be great if we could try to figure a way to get there.
Yeah, from something to keep in mind, drones are already doing deliveries in certain parts of the country right now. Walmart's very busy doing drone deliveries in parts of Texas, and I think Florida and some other states. And so it's already kind of in its kind of exploratory, really past exploratory phase, really. But it's not going to be too long before we're going to start to see some of our large retailers delivering products via drone, because we've kind of gotten to the point where we're spoiled where we can get stuff next day delivery, and now it's going to be soon to where you're going to get it within a few hours. And that's kind of the direction I think we're going just on the delivery side. But as has been mentioned, they're a great tool for public safety, for infrastructure inspections, for real estate photography, you name it. We're just going to start to see more of these in the airspace, which kind of goes to General Paz's points earlier. We need to make sure that we can really see where these drones are, and maybe we need to have something a little bit more powerful than remote ID, so we can have better airspace awareness, because the airspace awareness not only includes the drones, but includes the manned aircraft and everything else. So I think there's some great points being talked about by the panelists.
Yeah, and there was some stuff that we debated extensively when the FAA first put out rules for what they call Part 107, which is the rules that allow drones to fly now. One of the big things that was shot down by the drone manufacturing industry was the requirement at point of sale for a drone, just like when you buy a car, you have to have it registered and you have to show your driver's license. That was strongly opposed by the drone manufacturing industry, and we don't have that now. So you can go into a department store and buy a drone and not be a Part 107 trained pilot as required by law and get away with it. So going back to doing point of sale registration would be great. The other things that we debated in the remote ID aviation rulemaking committee was whether to do what industry calls networked remote ID, which is to require them to have an LTE or a 5G chip on the aircraft, which would virtually solve remote ID in one fell swoop if you're within 5G or LTE range, which, I'm sure everything in New Jersey is. That too was opposed by the drone manufacturing industry because they didn't want to do the additional burden of if you buy your drone, you got to get a Verizon chip or something like that. My counter to that is drone safety is so important that it's worth making drone users do that. And I just bought a brand new iWatch. Santa got it for me for Christmas, and it's got LTE on it, and it was absolutely painless in doing that. So that would go a long way towards fixing our problems out here. Where the drone industry is going in the future is we want to be able to fly beyond visual line of sight, and we want to be able to fly larger drones appropriately equipped in controlled airspace alongside manned aircraft. larger, 747 size drones that can do unmanned cargo, and then the smaller package delivery drones that we're talking about here. I mean, if you can imagine, I know you guys use drones for beach safety, but right now that's, a lifeguard looking at a drone and he can only fly it within a mile. You could very easily, cover just about every beach in Germany with a couple of New Jersey with a couple of medium-sized drones. Just talking Germany early this morning, a couple of medium-sized drones and watch it from, pick a spot in New Jersey anywhere remotely and do that very, very safely. So drones are the future. There's going to be more of them. We just need to do some common sense stuff to make sure that we can fly them safely.
Okay, as we're getting questions in from an audience here, one of the questions that I'm getting is, do we have any concerns because like many other products we use that are sensitive, the majority of drones are produced internationally rather than domestically. Does that bring any challenges? Any thoughts, gentlemen?
I would say one of the larger things is the lack of availability of drones. If you're looking at, your municipal, local, state governments, about 75% of the drones that they use are just off of the brand DJI alone, which is a Chinese-owned company. And there's a lot of issue with those drones potentially getting banned at the federal level. So then what's going to happen with the drones that are currently being used by the government? And then if you're switching over, you're looking at the commercial side of it. If they're using DJI drones to instruct critical infrastructure, is there a concern of security there? So I think it's a double-edged sword with it's a lack of availability, but the U.S. side of it, U.S. producers are too expensive to get to where DJI drones are at this point.
Okay, another question is something that you could recommend that would have an immediate positive impact from the point of sale to use. Any thoughts with that? That question came in from a member of our audience virtually.
Yeah, that kind of gets back to starting at the point of sale, requiring point of sale, treat drones like cars. So if you're going to buy a drone, show your license, prove that you're a Part 107 pilot, and then register the drone. Don't rely on people remembering to register their drone and then remembering to get their Part 107 thing. I'd be honest with you, I would also, partner with state, local, tribal law enforcement to enforce the existing drone rules, which I think is legal. Sheriff Russo might jump in here. I'm pretty sure that we could have county sheriff enforce rules when it comes to flying, whether they've got a Part 107 license or not. Flying without a license, flying an unregistered drone, flying a drone that's not broadcasting remote ID needs to be a big deal. And right now it isn't. But
I agree with
I'm
you.
a non-attorney spokesperson on that.
No, but I agree before. But if we can't track them to where they're flying it, how do we know they're actually who's flying it, right? It comes down to a big issue, and I don't know if that's financially, who's going to be paying for this hardware or technology, So definitely should be, just like you said before. Imagine financially, and then training, and just putting that all together.
Yeah. Go ahead, General.
Yeah, and I'll mention one thing that I'm about 70% sure the governor of New Jersey could do right now, and that is set up work with the federal authorities to set up a counter drone task force, call out the New Jersey Guard, and use your cross-state agreements to bring in U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force counter drone equipment, and do what we do with counter drug task force, where the Guard can't make arrests due to posse comitatus rules, but they can darn sure, take the Somerset County Sheriff's Department along with them, find the offending person, in this case, the drug example, and then the sheriff would make the address. I'm pretty sure under existing authorities that you could call out the Guard, and as long as you've got an FBI guy in the command post authorizing the Guard to take measures, that's legal. So this is such a big mission. You got to cover the whole country. I just don't see the FBI or even DHS being able to afford the type of equipment that it needs to cover the 40 or so critical infrastructure sites in New Jersey, let alone the rest of the nation. That's something the Guard has to do. And it's something that pairs up with what both the Army and the Air Force are doing, which is radically expanding counter drone gear for all their troops. They have to have it when they're overseas. They would get great training while they're here in the States, and the governor can deploy them. And in conjunction with their friends in the FBI and DHS, they can get authorities to engage those drones. But again, I'm a non-attorney spokesperson, so I don't know if any of that what I just said is legal.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney here, so I'm not going to comment on any of that. However, I will say one of the things that I think is really important, that in 2022, the Biden administration released their National Action Plan for Counter UAS, which was a very thoughtful way in which we can methodically and thoughtfully move forward. And some of that National Action Plan made it in the Senate bill, which is very well thought of right now. But something to note is that both DOJ and DHS endorsed the Biden National Action Plan because both agencies realized that at the state and local level, it should be the state and local law enforcement that should have some capabilities. But also something to keep in mind too is that if you're an owner or operator of critical infrastructure, drone detection technology should be part of your physical security program, because now you have to start to worry about that third dimension. Your gates, guns, and guards and key cards and cybersecurity are all really important, but now you have a third dimension of airspace. You've got to be able to detect and assess threats. And so I think having that technology at critical infrastructure and with our public safety agencies is a huge force multiplier, because once you can detect threats, then you can assess a threat, and then if necessary, respond within your legal left and right limits to that potential drone threat. So I think that's a big key. Certainly, I think there's a role for the Guard and for some other federal agencies and such, but we need to have that. It's like saying, hey, I'm protecting this power plant, but I don't have cameras. If I need them, can I borrow your camera? No, you should already have cameras there to be part of your physical security program. So we just kind of have to start to evolve what we're thinking of physical security is. We got to start thinking about that airspace too.
100%. These are thought-provoking discussions. We haven't heard anything about drones, and we talked about regulations over the last few weeks. I will say you've heard a lot of very thoughtful comments and discussions coming from the members of New Jersey's elected community, especially in the Congressman Josh Gottheimer. He's been out in front to talk about drones quite a bit. And Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. So even though we're behind the eight ball now, it is beginning a very intuitive and thought process. And as we know, certainly from law enforcement, often crisis brings change. I'm sure the military is very similar to that. And we're in a process now of having discussions like this that are going to lead to the change.
Yeah, I just, again, with being limited what law enforcement can do, what we've tried to do is just analyze any of the report stuff that came in, just to stay on top of it, working and speaking every day with the prosecutor's office, prosecutor and their chief of detectives and all. We work very, very well with them. So just trying to stay in tune to everything that's going on and looking over everything, I want to say stay ahead of the game, but as you know, most of us don't really know what really happened or what the drones were or weren't. So it's just everyone's just trying to do their part, I guess, and see what we can come up with collectively is the best thing to do.
Fantastic. So as we begin to round out this discussion, I'd just like to give everyone an opportunity. I think since we're all many people that don't have any knowledge of drones that are concerned about what they see on television, let's take a minute or two to separate fact from fiction here, where we talk about facts and fiction for someone that designed for someone that does not have a knowledge of aviation or military or law enforcement like us. Who would like to start separating fact from fiction?
I'll take a stab at that one. Well, I'll kind of round up some of the comments that I've had I think we should always encourage our public to continue to be vigilant, like what we've seen throughout the Northeast in New Jersey. If you see something, say something. That's something that we've always asked our public to do. And so I want to continue to do that. I think what would be good is if we, help people to understand how to deconflict drones from other things in the nighttime sky that can also appear as drones, and also to recalibrate what is or is not a threat will make law enforcement job much easier. But then we also, in order to really understand fact from fiction, as part of that, you also need to have drone detection technologies out there protecting our critical infrastructure and are available in our cities and towns so they can deconflict those types of things. But it also enables other things such as drone deliveries and beyond visual line of sight, aircraft operations, and things like that. So I think we just need to kind of start evolving those types of matters.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Okay, finally, the question that I'm sitting here, as we're listening to this discussion, is thinking, what should we be doing that we're not right now? Would be a great way to round up this discussion. What do you think? Who'd like to start off on that?
Yeah, I mean, I will. I mean, we need to recognize that we're living in the 21st century and start acting accordingly. I mean, drones are here. They're not going away. Like everything man has invented, we've figured out how to turn a marvelous invention that can do a tremendous amount of good for mankind into a weapon of war. Our adversaries know that. If you've watched what's been going on in Gaza and Ukraine, it's drone warfare out there. And we need to have a suitable defense. I always go back to a really good book that I'd recommend. It's called The Most Dangerous Enemy by Stephen Bungay. And it's about the Royal Air Force and the Battle of Britain. And kind of the myth behind the Battle of Britain was the Germans were the combat experienced guys and they ripped into the Brits and, they barely won. The truth is the Germans were the ones that ran into a steel trap that had been brewing since 1918. Brits got bombed a couple times by Zeppelins, and in response to that, they invented the Air Force. The RAF was the world's first Air Force. They invented radar. They invented the air defense system that we use literally to this day, and finally invented the Spitfire. And it's a reason we're all speaking English together on this web. But the point being is we don't think anything about how that's changed the world for manned aircraft. We got radars all over the place. We're protected by fighter jets all over the place against manned aircraft. We have to replicate that for unmanned aircraft, and it's a different type of defense, and it's going to require a major infrastructure investment to do that. We absolutely have to involve state, local, and tribal law enforcement in this. We absolutely have to involve key commercial entities like the oil companies protecting their refineries. I think absolutely this is a mission for the National Guard because they're the only ones that have the ability to organize, train, and equip for this level of air defense. They're the only ones that stand a chance of getting this level of resourcing to defend the whole country. They have to do it in conjunction with our federal agencies, law enforcement, because the last thing you want to do is to have the National Guard, being policemen, as they're prohibited from doing by law. But it's a big mission, and it's something that we need to treat as a big mission, and it's something that we need to do something about now.
I would just like to throw in there that the only way you got to get the information out there to people. That's the only way we're not going to panic. You're not going to get these thousands of calls coming in, and I don't think that really, I don't think it happened at all this time. But it's slowly trickled out. You got to get the information out there for people, keep people calm. Like you said, they're here. Drones are here. The technology is only going to get better. Like you said, deliveries. I think with law enforcement, it's a massive undertaking, but I think it's essential for law enforcement in the future. What we can come up with, what we can do, and how we can help the community and ourselves safety. So, but getting that information out here, communicating, like having a forum like this. Again, thank you for providing this. Is essential so people don't panic, and then they understand that a lot of positive can be coming out of this and will be coming out of this. So
I think moving forward, I think it's important for the public to know what the rules and regulations are that restrict drone use. Flying below 400 feet is what's required with drones. So anything above, if it is a drone, they're breaking the law. I think that's something important that, the public should know and what to look out for. But as we move forward, I think local, state, county government, they need a lot more resources to be able to combat this issue. So.
Okay, as we round out the program, I'd just like to give each of you an opportunity to offer closing thoughts or anything that we've missed or something that you think would be valuable to the people that are watching us out there virtually. Richard, would you like to start?
As we close this out, I would say one of the biggest things is the commercial drone pilot field is already a very heavy regulated field. As a commercial drone pilot, we're restricted by a ton of different things, TFRs, NOTAMs, different things that we basically have to be on the lookout for. There needs to be a better gap bridged between the consumer drone pilot and the commercial drone pilot. There should be training classes that you have to go to, just like driving a car. You know, you're flying something that if it falls from the sky or if you crash into something, it can do a lot of damage. So I think there needs to be better regulation with your residential or your non-commercial drone pilots in the future. And thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel.
Thank you so much for bringing a unique perspective. Tom?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. A couple of things to round out. One, I think the FAA needs more resources. There are limited law enforcement resources in the FAA, so that's going to need to expand quite a bit. They need some more resources to be able to do their job. As has been mentioned, we need a more educated drone pilot population, not only from the hobbyist side, but also the commercial side. And then we really need some expanded legislation and authority is going to be really helpful. Senate Bill 1631 is the best bill that's out there right now that expands capabilities of state and local law enforcement as well as critical infrastructure and starts a pilot program that would start to expand some defeat capabilities into state and local law enforcement. I know General Paz has mentioned the Guard is another option too. So we have a lot of different ways that we can tackle this problem, but I think those are the big things for me, and we will always be continuously evolving and learning. I think someday it's going to be fairly common for law enforcement to all understand airspace rules and regulations. That's going to have to start to be something that's going to be added into the already very busy law enforcement curriculum for the academy and such. I think we're going to start to see this evolve in a lot of different areas.
Thank you, Tom. Sheriff, any thoughts?
I'll reiterate again, you guys, communications, right? Regulations, licensing, and registering. I think that's essential to the future. Money and resources, obviously, that's always a difficult one. I'm not much with drones. I appreciate learning today what you guys have told us and what I've listened to. But I do see, like I always agree, like with the canines and different technology, this is something for police that can really be essential. That really could just safety-wise for officers and the community, but that comes money and training for officers, whether it's training to identify to help the public or it's training to fly them and help the public in a safety aspect. But I do appreciate the information you guys provided today, and I'm glad that I was here, and I thank St. Elizabeth for putting this out. But communications is big, I think.
Sheriff, thank you so much. General, I'd love to leave it with you.
Yeah. Hey, well, thanks for the invite. Really appreciate you doing this. St. Elizabeth, I know it's during the holidays and all that, but this is such an important issue that I think it's worth listening to this even over the Christmas break. I agree with what everyone has said. First and foremost, we can't ban all drones. We should ban all drones over critical infrastructure and have the sensors to back that up. Generally, I agree 100% with Richard. It's not the commercial UAS pilots that are the issue. They've got skin in the game. They don't want to have their license taken away. They don't want to have their livelihood taken away. We've got to do better with regulating the consumer drone folks. And I think there's a great example of that in how we do cars, which is a great partnership between federal authorities and state authorities. You need a license to drive a car. You need a license to drive a drone. You need to register a car. You need to register your drone. I think that state and local should get more authorities to do this. I also think that a lot of our state and local folks should really press to test the boundaries of what they're allowed to do, even under current laws. Like the argument I'd make, the FAA obviously controls drones, and certain federal agencies obviously control counter UAS stuff the second that the drone leaves the ground, but they got to land and take off from somewhere. And I think that state and local folks should get much more involved in how drones are operated from their territory, to include possibly licensing and taxing folks out there. So it's the 21st century. Drones are here to stay. Drones are here as a weapon of war. Drones are here as a weapon of peace. They're very useful. We just need to make sure that we're putting the resources in to make sure that we're defended and that they're flown safely.
I'll just jump in. Last thing, one of the first things I'm going to start doing in January is I have the Chiefs of Police Association in the county and the state, and then we have the Sheriff's Association. So I'm going to bring it up to their attention and see if we can start things rolling, at least for locally, right, municipal and county. So we'll see if we can get going.
Absolutely. I mean, this is as I said a few times, a very important discussion. We're all learning here. This is something that we hadn't paid attention to. Switch hats to my other job in the sheriff, working for the sheriff. We've begun to analyze data every day now about media reports, as the sheriff mentioned. Somerset County, it's a lovely place, a little bit far from New York, but the next president of the United States goes to bed there many times. And so it's very important that we are careful and that we are vigilant to make sure that we know what's going on above us. One of the things that, St. Elizabeth is very proud of, in addition to our normal academic programs, is the Police Studies Institute being adaptable. Law enforcement is an ever-changing field. It's a profession that reinvents ourselves constantly, and this is obviously a challenge that has come on. So one of the things that we've already begun to do at St. Elizabeth is look to see where we can create some kind of a curriculum or an educational experience for law enforcement, specifically about drones, because it's clear that this is a topic that's important. It came onto our radar, as many things do, in media report type crisis, but there's always a positive thing. We like to say that there's a positive aspect to every crisis. And as this does ramp down, I will say, in all fairness, it has become a little bit less hysterical in the media over the last few days. I think we're beginning to look at things in a more intuitive, a more thoughtful way. But we're prepared at St. Elizabeth to meet the challenges. We appreciate your taking the time during a Christmas break to put this together very quickly, virtually. We anticipate having a discussion on the grounds, on campus, in the coming months, a little bit more detailed discussion. And we'd love for you to be a part of it. I thank you so much on behalf of St. Elizabeth University for your time today. And for the audience that was out there, thank you for your questions, all of the dialogue I've been getting. We appreciate your support and your interest, and wish everyone a healthy and happy and safe New Year's.